Welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we cut through the bullshit
Greggy,
so we can get naked.
you can't say that.
Why not? How would you say it then?
Well, maybe more like, welcome to Undressing Intimacy, where we undress emotionally so we can undress physically.
That's exactly what I said. Not sure what the problem is.
To episode number.
35.
If you are watching this, you can definitely tell there's something different. And if you're listening to, you might be able to tell there's something different. We tried really, really hard to be diligent and get a podcast recorded before I left for Vegas for the horse show. And we did it. And it was fantastic. And we were excited and high-fiving each other. And then I went to go edit it. And guess what? For some reason, zero audio got recorded. And it's hard to do a podcast without audio.
Very disappointing. It was such a good discussion. And what I love about these discussions, if it's okay to say it, is we don't even really know what we're going to talk about before we talk, and we just let them unravel. And we learned so much in that discussion, and we'll never have that recorded. So very disappointing.
Yeah, so there must have been a private thing we had to learn between ourselves. But we definitely want to talk about the topic we talked about before, so we'll try it again. And it was about disappointment. So that's a little funny that we found plenty of disappointment as we went to go get this recording and it wasn't there. So we're going to do this, me, live on location from the South Point Hotel and Casino. My horse Clifford's down in the basement. He's getting ready to be shown in a couple of days. So we're excited about that. And Amy back home from her office. So we're going to try this out and see how it goes.
I do get to come join you this time, at least in a few days.
Yeah, I can't
Hear
wait.
you.
Wednesday, it's going to be great. So what we're talking about is when the spontaneous person is the person that's really ready to go. We may call it high desire, but we kind of got away from that because we don't want a higher and lower desire. But the spontaneous is always ready to go. And the responsive person really takes a while to get to that arousal place. And when they get to that arousal place, then they find desire later on. And so it's really the differences that we find mostly in all marriages. We come at this sexual desire in a different way. So the question that Amy had started asking me the other day, which meant I was either in trouble or she was trying to figure something out, was what happens when you really have that spontaneous moment and you have that sexual desire and you have a bit as a responsive person and maybe it just doesn't work out. Maybe we're busy that night, we get tired, we can't do it. In that moment, how do you deal with that?
I am really curious about your experience as a spontaneous desire person. Not to say that responsive doesn't have disappointment, because we surely do, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But because I see spontaneous is the spouse who usually is doing that invite, and when you are putting out the invite, and if that isn't received, there's going to be disappointment. And what I see so often is that disappointment spirals into some really negative places and becomes a very personal either attack or feeling attacked. And I just wanted to hear from your personal experience when there's something that doesn't happen. Maybe you've had, an idea or a spark or a fantasy and it's been presented, and maybe it's not even rejection. Maybe it's like trying something and, it just didn't pan out as amazing as it was in your mind's eye or in your fantasy. And given that disappointment, how do you then keep engaging and keep moving on? Because I see so many spontaneous desire spouses who hit that disappointment and it just becomes a brick wall that they then get stuck at and don't move through.
Yeah, I think the first thing that's most important is that disappointment is real and you can't dismiss it or just get rid of it. And oftentimes that's where we find ourselves, right? We get so tied into this and it's so painful to go through this, then we dismiss that disappointment wasn't there at all. So the first and foremost, you got to realize that that disappointment is real, right? You had this desire that you wish to share with a significant other, a spouse that you really love and care for. And when it didn't happen, there is a natural disappointment. Now, the difference is in the past, I would make that disappointment mean something else. It meant that you didn't love me, that you didn't care for me, that I wasn't desirable, and that you didn't want to have that moment with me, and there must be something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really working through the point of understanding there is desire, there is disappointment that comes with it if it doesn't happen, and that doesn't mean something else that's wrong with
Yes, I see a lot of clients who either go into some type of personal attack on themselves or who decide, you know what, I'm just going to try and suppress all desires, all wishes, all hopes, and try and push everything down to avoid that disappointment, like act as if I don't have this desire.
That is absolutely where I went. When I found out that my desire was causing a problem, and it really wasn't the desire causing a problem, it was really me trying to extract validation from Amy by using my desire and my sexual needs to get that validation. That was the problem. But when I discovered that and what the impact it had on Amy, that even it had caused her feelings of kind of PTSD because she was doing duty sex and that was just awful. I definitely went to a place of suppression. We talk about the enmeshment side of differentiation, and that's where I was totally at. And it did take me very much to the toxic independent because I was hell bent that I wasn't going to cause that problem anymore. And so that I was determined not to have that happen and try to suppress that. But just like any other feeling that we have, if we try to suppress it, we know what that can happen, right? It's like a beach ball effect where if you push it down, it's going to come up even bigger. We talk about if we don't process through that, it can come out sideways or in a way that we don't respect. And we definitely saw that over and over again. So even in the suppression mode and pretending like you didn't have that desire, it just caused that feeling to get louder and louder and louder and not to be resolved.
Mm. I see it cause feelings get louder and then behaviors that you don't respect. And I also see another impact of trying to suppress and pretend is like a dissociation where you then dissociate from yourself and your other desires in life or your other hopes, dreams and wishes and so like literally shutting down the self. And both of those are obviously very destructive and not the hoped for outcome. And all of this to avoid disappointment. So, how was it that you were able to say, this is disappointing? How do you feel disappointment? How do you metabolize through that and not allow it to go to either suppression or into like a personal attack? What happens in those moments that allows you to move through that?
Yeah, it took a lot of hard work and I still mess it up quite a bit. But I think the first thing is just recognizing that that is a feeling of disappointment. We go back to how our brain works, and our primitive brain really is trying to protect us in those moments. It thinks those moments of rejection or disappointment are going to cause damage to us, that we're going to be excluded out of a group or excluded out of a tribe, per se, and then we're not going to be able to survive. That's the primitive brain telling us this is damaging. We need to do something about this. So the first thing is just one being able to recognize it. And it's taken a long time for me to recognize that that's what it is, right? That I having these feelings of disappointment, and it is disappointment. And being able to name that and understand that that's what it is really helps you get to that place where you can process through it. And so it's really just going through and understanding that I'm having this emotion. I may not even be able to fix it, and there's nothing to fix there. Disappointment's not going to go away. I'm not going to get rid of it. It's understanding what it is and saying, okay, I recognize that. I am naming that's disappointment, and I'm okay. I'm going to survive. Thank you, brain, for telling me that. I'm going to add some logic to this. Amy does love me. Doesn't mean something is wrong with me. I mean, we had this happen just the other night, right? Um, so we were enjoying some intimacy. I had this great idea of what I wanted to try. I asked you, you were willing to do it. We tried it, and it wasn't so great. It was wah, 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 right?
Right.
And in the past, I would have gone, okay, I'm terrible. My sexual desire is terrible. I can't believe I even brought that up. Why would I do that? That's bad. But instead of doing that, I think you were able to watch me go through it, recognize that I was disappointed. You saw the disappointment, but I was able to settle myself down and process and say, no, that's just not something that Amy desires right now in this moment. And so I'm not going to make that mean something else. Thank you, brain, for having that disappointment moment, but I'm going to move on. And we had a very wonderful experience of being close together.
Mhm.
In the past, that ended up in me sulking, being upset, you getting distance because you don't want to, you want to back away from it and not experience either, and it just really would have come out sideways.
Right. There were a lot of things you said in that I want to go back to. So let's see if I can remember all of them. The first one is you said the primitive brain trying to protect you. And what I want to say is that the feeling of social isolation or rejection is one of the brain's threats because to our primitive brain, if you are alone, that is ultimately life threatening. So, although that seems dramatic, and obviously your life isn't in a threatened stage to the brain, it does have that visceral response. And so recognizing, hey, I am safe, my life isn't threatened, my marriage isn't over, I do have a relationship here, but this thing didn't happen this time, or something to that effect. So I know it can seem like we're being overly dramatic, but that is kind of how the body is wired to respond. So I wanted to speak to that. Also, another thing I wanted to speak to was if the spontaneous desire is feeling disappointed, the responsive desire is feeling like the disappointment,
Mm-hmm.
the one who disappointed, who wasn't enough, who didn't perform up to par, who didn't meet expectations, who didn't, show up properly. And I think disappointment happens on both sides. And I want to talk more about responsive in a minute, but I also want to say that we expect a lot of our marriages right now. We expect our spouses to be our friend and our companion and our financial partner and our provider and our nurturer and helping with the kids and running the home and also doing all of these activities in faith and church and community and as well as being our lover and sometimes our counselor and therapist. And because there's so much expected of spouses, there will be disappointment. And because we are human, even without expectations being that high, we will disappoint. There is no human that can meet all of the needs of another human being. And we are human and we fall short and we're learning and we have blind spots and we can't always see and know and do everything. So it's inevitable if you're going to be in a relationship that you will be disappointed. And I think really a hallmark of how thriving a relationship can be is how well you can handle that disappointment. And what do you make it mean? Are you attacking yourself? Are you saying, I must be bad or I must be broken or something is wrong with me or I have to shut down parts of me in order to be in this relationship, which, by the way, is never true. So it's really like the disappointment is not so much the problem as where people go within that disappointment, like what they made it mean about themselves or their relationship or their marriage. And that's really what I'm really curious how you don't go down the path of I'm broken, I'm wrong, this hurts, this part of me is inherently damaging. So like how do you shift in that moment when you're feeling that threat from your brain? You've named that it's disappointment. How do you then not get lost into that one of those spirals?
Well, you said a lot that has to be unpacked there, right? it didn't just come at being able to feel and understand the emotion. It came with a lot of work of one understanding and what my sexuality is and being okay with that, right? I used to think it was destructive myself, and so anything that triggered that, if it was disappointment, it would set that as okay. Here's a fact to back up that this is bad, and so a lot of effort went into saying, what is my sexuality, and am I okay with it? What does it mean to me, and am I okay with myself? It's being that whole person that we talk about in the middle of differentiation, and that was a lot of struggle and hard work to go do. And again, like I said, I don't get it right sometimes still. But in the end, I can calm myself down enough to realize that my sexuality is okay and that I can process through that. I'll give you another example that kind of shows this recently. Uh, when we were at the retreat, and we talk all about sexuality, we talk about a bunch of things around this. And I don't know if it's coincidence, what happens there, or if my phone's listening to me, but it seemed at the week after we got back from the retreat that my social media post had all kinds of sexual stuff on it. I came to you and said, there's boobies all over my Facebook post, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't really understand what was happening at that moment. I struggled with it. I was like, okay, what do I do here? I think in the past I probably would have indulged in that a little more. But it also drove me into a place of being more needy, right? So I had this all coming at me and I would bring it to you and it was more needy. And I know you felt that too. And there was this beginning of this spiral. So, like, I'm giving this example because what I want to say is that you're not going to always catch what's going on right away. You're not always going to go, oh, well, that's disappointment. I'm going to process through it and we're going to be okay. Sometimes it takes us going through and having some of these barriers that we hit and knowing this doesn't feel right and it feels different and I'm starting to spiral out of here. And it took a few times of you saying, what is going on? And for me, kind of saying, I don't really know, but to calm myself enough around to go back and be curious to try to figure out what was really going on. And in
Mhm.
that moment, I couldn't answer to you like, oh, look at my social media is full of boobies and it's making me ultra aroused and needy. And I haven't taken care of that in a way that I had to. And I'm being disappointed in the spiral. I couldn't have named that at that moment. And so
Mhm.
it took
You couldn't
enough of being
sort it
able
all
to
out
set that
yet.
aside. Right. It took enough of you being able to help point it out in some ways, me stepping aside and saying what's really going on and kind of piecing the puzzle back together.
Mm.
One great thing about emotions, and we talk about kind of processing through that and what that looks like. You don't have to catch it in the moment to be able to learn from it and understand it and get yourself back to where you need to go. You can see the trailhead of what's going on in that moment, and you can say, "This doesn't sit right with me. Let me go walk back up the tree and figure out kind of where this is coming from."
Mhm.
And so I'm giving that example to try to say that it's not just always as easy as, hey, I'm disappointed, I processed through it, we're done. I think
Right.
the example we gave the other night kind of happened more in that fast moment because we caught it early and able to do it. But a lot of times there's going to be patterns that you see and you just don't feel right and respect. And it's putting the effort in to go and try to figure out what's going on.
In that case, there wasn't an invitation extended. It wasn't like there was a no. There was just this inner wrestle that was happening, and you couldn't even pinpoint what was the instigator of it until you got had a little more time in that wrestle.
Yeah, it was even like my normal invitations. Like we talk about my morning snuggles.
Mm,
There was a feeling of trying to extract something from you
mm.
instead of just being in the morning and being with you.
Yeah, it feels very different to be invited in a way that is about connecting and invited in a way that is about extracting or taking.
Yeah, it's crazy because here I am doing the exact same things that I do every morning, but yet there's a complete different outcome because of that intention behind it, right? Of what I was trying to do. And when I walk back and figured out that because I had been bombarded with all this sexuality stuff, that I was uber aroused and I was trying to solve that.
Mm.
And I think that's another big piece of this puzzle, right? Someday I might do a thesis on this. I can't figure out where it's coming from, but I have a really strong feeling that sexual desire needs to not be something we try to resolve. It has become something we try to fix, resolve, and get rid of. And when we do that, we put expectations around someone else doing it for it or ourselves instead of being in the moment and knowing that it's part of us. And it's that eros energy that lights us on fire and makes us alive.
Mm-hmm.
And how sad it is that we spend all this time trying to resolve that instead
Get
of
rid of
being able
it.
to sit in it. Yeah. And so that's what I was trying to do. I had all this forward Eros energy, and I don't know if it was Eros at the time because it wasn't legitimate because it was kind of coming from social media and stuff. It got me into a place where I was trying to do something to get rid of it. I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
extract that from you. I was trying to, if I have sex with you and have an orgasm, then I won't feel this way anymore because I've
Mm-hmm.
solved this problem. And really, it will never be solved because you can never get enough because you're trying to solve something that's not solvable, and it's not something that's going to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big picture of it, right? Is understanding that our sexual desire is something that is a blessing that we can live and do it and invite each other to join in. But when we try to solve it, it often becomes an extraction point and trying to take something from someone else.
And so, how did you put together that that was happening for you? And how did you move through that?
I wish I could tell you it was quick, and it wasn't. I think we were several weeks doing this. But when I kept going back and not having that resolve and still feeling in this place, it was kind of how I felt in the past. I didn't want to be there, and I understood I didn't want it. It took me a moment to say, I have got to stop. I have got to take some time to be curious of what's happening here and why am I in this point. I think it was really important to be, I couldn't tell you what was going on, but I could be honest enough to say, I would try to hide that from you before where I would like be shamed because there was stuff on my social media that I didn't want you to see. And I was being honest with you and open and telling you what was going on. And that was a good step forward. But it was being honest with you and then stopping to be curious enough to say, I don't like where I'm at. I felt what it feels like not to try to extract from you. I want to get back there. So I need to go back and unwind where this is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when someone is trying to extract from you, or when there is an expectation, unspoken or spoken, because sometimes they're very much there, but very much hidden, on the other side of that, the person, usually, if we're talking in sexual terms, a responsive desire feels like they are the disappointment, that they are broken. And if they could just dot, 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 if they could just figure out this desire thing and just put out and produce, then it would solve this problem. And feeling like you're a disappointment is obviously devastating, right? Feeling like if you could just figure out how to produce this arousal or produce this desire, then everything would be fine.
The thing is, that just starts a bigger spiral, right? Because you try to produce something to solve it and you can't, and now you feel taken from
Mm-hmm.
and you feel awful. And that doesn't bring you closer together, that doesn't bring you intimacy. And ultimately, what we're trying to do, every single one of us, is we're trying to feel close and chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And this reaction that we're talking about back and forth between the two of us does not get us anywhere near that. It takes us further apart and makes us feel even worse. And so we continue to try to do things that we think will fix it, and it causes it to be worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're feeling like a disappointment, it can sometimes become part of your identity, right? I'm a failure. I'm disappointing. I'm not a good spouse. For me, it was I'm not a good wife. I'm not providing what I should be providing. And this disappointment becomes a spiral and attack on yourself, but in a little different way. than it is for the spontaneous desire.
I almost think for me, some of the canary in the coal mine things that I catch myself doing is I go back to if Amy would only do XYZ, if she would only do this one sexual act, or if she would actually be so turned on that she would initiate sex, then all this pent up sexual frustration I have would be taken care of. And it's again putting it back onto the person, expecting them to solve something that they can't solve. And I had those thoughts back in my mind, and they were scary to me again because it took me back to my regressed self of where I didn't like to be.
Mm.
And I wish that those canaries had chirped loud enough for me to wake up sooner, but that's not happening. It's human nature. You're trying to solve this. Sometimes it takes a little while to go, this is not getting me where I need to go. I need to stop. I need to be curious of what's going on. Why do I think Amy needs to do these things to solve this problem that doesn't need to be solved in the first place?
Right. Arousal and desire are not something to be solved. And when you feel like you're being critiqued, right? If there's an expectation and you're not meeting up to it, that certainly doesn't produce any more arousal or desire because that is not a space that you want to move into. And so feeling like you're less than or not enough or not producing certainly doesn't help. And I think for me, recognizing my own worth was what helped me move through the disappointment to separate the idea that my identity was based on producing for you, was based on being a certain way for you, about meeting every fantasy, that I was a whole person and desire and arousal was not something to be solved. It wasn't my job to service you, to take care of you.
Amy in her life, that is how she's been able to take care of everything. She's been able to produce. She did it in school. The only B she ever got was when she took religion class, which I think is the funniest and greatest thing in the world. She was able to do it in playing the piano, and when she worked, she was able to be successful. And being a mom, she could just outwork anybody and produce, and that's how she measured herself in that production. And the problem, it doesn't work. It does not work in intimacy.
Yeah, you can't produce. And so my go-to survival strategy, or you can call it defense mechanism or coping tool of just being a producer, was failing me and failing me miserably. And then I would take on the identity that I was a failure. And so really being able to work through disappointment was even more about really understanding that my worth is not based on producing. It's not based on earning or achieving, that it goes much deeper. And that my body wasn't about having to be a certain way and a certain size and a certain this. Like all the measurements that I had placed around so many areas in my life, I really had to like deconstruct those and face them. And that's what allowed me to move through disappointment and realize I'm not a disappointment and I don't have to earn here. And if there was a critique between us, then I needed to speak up about it and say, my job is not to meet your every expectation. This is a place where we can join each other, but I'm not here to just meet expectations.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest things that's been helpful for me that you've been able to do is you've been able to stay in and stand in those moments
Mm-hmm.
where you would retreat, right? And what that caused me to do was to get louder and bigger to try to chase you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned not to be so aggressive in my responses. I still have passion, and sometimes I'm not really great at it, but I've learned to be less aggressive and to sit back and try to figure out what's going on and listen and respond less, but listen more and be curious about it. The thing that's really helped me on your side is you've been able to stay in it.
Yeah, I was definitely the withdrawer, the avoidant, the if I can't produce, then I'll just pull away or push you away. And so realizing that my worth wasn't at stake here, that you could be disappointed, and it didn't mean that I was a disappointment. Even when you referred to this recent encounter where you're like, hey, let's try this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, that's more of a brake than an accelerator. And it wasn't, me not wanting to try and me not, trying to be all in. It's just like, yeah, my body's not really digging that. And so instead of making that mean I was a disappointment and I should, it was like, yeah, that thing didn't work. And there's still lots of room for us to come together and for us to be intimate. And there was. And yet we still had to pause for disappointment. And so you can feel disappointment and then keep going. And I think in that moment, what would have played out differently was in the face of feeling your disappointment, I would have pulled away and that would have been the end. You would have been feeling disappointed and I would have been feeling like the disappointment, the problem, and
Yeah,
recognizing there wasn't a problem to solve. There was nothing that had gone wrong. It's like when
right.
you try something, we were building some garden patio boxes the other day. And there's several steps, and you try something, you're like, oh, that didn't work. Okay, next thing, that didn't work. And we tried something, it didn't work. So then we keep going. And rather than making those like a personal attack against each other or against ourselves, you can see, yes, that was disappointing. I can feel disappointed. And I can feel disappointed because, it was something, like you said, that you were looking forward to and you thought would be fun and it wasn't fun. That's disappointing.
Yeah.
And keep going.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say even at the very end of that, so we built these planter boxes, and I was so excited because it took way longer than I thought it could, and I must be getting old because it hurt way more than it should have. Every muscle in me hurt, and I was crying out. But when I had built these boxes, oh, I thought these are beautiful, and we started filling them with dirt, and they became even more beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then Amy mentioned, "Have you checked to make sure that we didn't cover any sprinklers?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure, but let's just double check." And sure enough, holy crap! I turned one on. It was right in the middle of my plastic box. And talk about disappointment. I was trying to get it done because I knew I was coming out here to Vegas and I didn't have a lot of time to do it. There were storms coming in and there was pressure on, and I was tired and sore from doing the work that I had done before. And it did take a moment for us to step back and take a break and go, "This is disappointing.
This is disappointing.
Okay, so what are we going to go to do fix this?" And it's easier to see it there, right? I'm not going to leave the sprinkler in the middle of the sprinkler box. That can't work, right? So I have to step in and have a solution. I can't quit because the sprinklers will come on and it will ruin everything. I had to find a solution. So it's easier to see it in that moment that you have to step in and do it. For some reason, in this relationship thing, it's harder to see that way, right? It's harder to see like I need to stay engaged here. I need to find a solution. I need to get over that disappointment and move on. I think in the past, I would have been angry.
Even more than saying you needed to find a solution, you needed to stay engaged in the process and be like, okay, there's a speed bump here, there's a road bump here, this didn't work as planned, things didn't go as I had hoped. There's another thing to have to look at and consider, another variable in there. Okay, like
Yeah,
it's disappointing. And it meant more time. Yes, it meant changes, right? It meant different things had to move around. Yes, that is true. And that is disappointing. And that doesn't mean that you were a failure doing it or that I was a failure pointing out, like, hey, you think there's a sprinkler there? Right? Like you take out that personal element and you start to get more focused on the goal, which in intimacy is that space where the two of you can connect and be wholly with each other. In the case of the patio garden boxes, it was being able to have these be very functional garden boxes. And so you're still engaged in that process.
that's interesting that you said that. I hadn't thought about this before, but as you said it, is that I was trying to get an accelerant to get us to somewhere. Is probably another problem, right? So even in this intimacy, I was trying to accelerate the arousal to get you to somewhere, and that was the problematic thing. I guess it wasn't problematic before that's what I've been so unable to handle because I was trying to get you there. And when I did it, I wouldn't have put the time in to be curious about understanding what is, but also to stop and retreat a little bit to get back and get to a place where we could be intimate and that we could be close together.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, I'm going to put here and it's going to light a fire and here we go. And instead of lighting fire, it was like putting water, dousing
Wah,
Amy out.
wah, wah.
And yeah, and the front, and I would have been frustrated because it's not like it was something we'd never tried before. And in the past, it had been an accelerant, right? It
Mm-hmm.
had gotten her to a place that was quicker. And that's sometimes as the spontaneous desire, you can't wrap your head around that. You're like, well, for me, it always works, right?
Mm-hmm.
You light that match and I'm gone. But to realize it's different for spontaneous and that
We're responsive.
Amy was in a different place. I mean, responsive, and Amy was in a different place, and her mind was different, and that wasn't an accelerant for her. And instead of pouting and being angry about it, I was disappointed. There was definitely disappointed. You can't dismiss that.
Yeah.
But I was able to step back and pause, and I think we had a very wonderful and enjoyable experience
Mm-hmm.
together
Mm-hmm.
after that.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, we ended up trying something that just sort of happened between us that we don't typically really do, and it was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, we we even actually kind of took the end goal out of the measure
Mm-hmm.
an orgasm of being finished. I kind of even dropped out of it, and it just was let's just enjoy that we're together and the time that we're here,
And
and it was way more enjoyable.
I think that's where desire, sexual desire, the trap can be. If it is all about the finish, you've like missed the journey. That is the journey of simmering and arousal, of being close, of being naked and exposed and vulnerable and connecting. That is really the most powerful part of the journey. And when you try and fast forward to an ending, you kind of miss the journey.
I think it's so hard for a spontaneous person because that's kind of how we've measured ourselves forever, right?
Mm,
And not only that, we've had all these ideas of how it could be even faster, quicker, and better.
mm.
You know,
Why do you want it to go faster and quicker?
I don't know because you put that as the goal, right? Orgasm becomes the thing that's measured that you were successful, that you were desirable enough, or you were chosen enough that you were able to bring your partner to orgasm. You were able to see that outcome happen.
Like a badge of honor?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It's not like I can't tell you you're right. If you enjoy it so much, you want to just to make it last forever. But for some silly reason, in our, my whole mind has been around that that was the measurement of success.
Mm.
And even when I talked about this before, when we talked about, you know, sitting in and not having this orgasm as the outcome, and the slow sex we talked about more of the tantric sex. Even when I tried that, I admitted that I messed it up because I was still trying to, oh, am I doing it right? I'm still trying to measure, am I doing it right? I don't know how. I'm not very good at doing this, but when I can take away, am I doing it right, and just be in the moment, that's when the best intimacy ever happens between the
Mm-hmm.
two of us. And I don't know yet. I have not figured out yet how to do that on a regular basis.
Mm.
I seem to fall back to the I need to measure this and we need to have an outcome to know it's good. And if we go back and be really honest, what happened here just the other day, that's where I was going. This disappointment reset me and made me think about where I was at to a place of I really just want to be with you and I just want to enjoy this moment together and I'm going to go do that. And that's what became enjoyable because
Mm-hmm.
everything else just kind of went away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know yet how to start that way.
Mm.
And maybe every time you can. It's not like we talk about weekend and week sex, right?
Maybe it's a balance of both.
Yeah, blow my mind on the weekend. Right? Just, we'll have some fun on the weekdays. And every occurrence may not be this mind blowing place that I can go. And I may not be able to do it, but I don't know what it is, but it's interesting to me. How can I get myself more of getting rid of that mindset so that I can just be in the moment?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's so destructive about going back. And let's tie it back to like the social media and everything, because social media and pornography and all that, they portray it as, right, you have this sexual prowess and you're gonna turn someone on and you're gonna get them to climax. That's how they portray it.
Mm.
And so it really is brought to you in a way that portrays it as that. And I think that as a society, and for myself for years, that's kind of what my mind is trained to.
Mm.
So maybe it just takes time for me to get different place,
Mm.
be more regular on just enjoying the moment. I'm thinking so quickly as I'm in the moment. I'm thinking so quickly of, oh, what am I going to do next to get to the next stage? How can I get to the next place of arousal so that we can move on? And it takes something big. I talked about the first time it took me being so tired I couldn't continue that way. So I was so tired that I had to be in the moment. I think here's another example for me of this moment of disappointment stopped me to take that away. So I wish I could find a way to start that way. I guess I don't have that, but um, going back to, we really have to, I think, understand that we will be disappointed. We can overcome that. And we can be more in the moment. If we can, then we can have better intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I feel that I am a disappointed feeling, that is now sort of my cue that I am trying to be in that producing mindset. My identity has really shifted to just being more about I'm a person of worth, I'm flawed. Obviously, I don't like disappointing you, but also I recognize it's literally impossible not to. And so while I want to love you well and I want to learn to love myself well, the path to learning to do that is involved does involve disappointment. And in those
Mm.
disappointments, it might highlight some more places where I'm still linking my worth to some type of production. And for you,
It's in,
maybe you're linking your worth to some type of measure and like badge, like we reached this mark or this point. And so maybe it's even showing both of us where we're still developing.
I find it still interesting because when we went through this exercise in the past, and this is where we can take the podcast or not, but it's going there. When it went to this exercise of trying to slow down and be in the moment, you, even as responsive sexual desire, found yourself at a crossroads, not knowing where to go when you didn't have an end place to get there and measure.
Mm-hmm.
So, how have you tried to change the mindset, and have you been a little more successful in doing it from a responsive side of the equation?
I think from the one who was supposed to produce, it was easier to say, "Oh, you got to this point, so you produced what was
That was a gold star on your forehead.
yeah, that was a gold star. You did it. Good job. You fulfilled this task or this requirement or this expectation." And when we removed that, it was like, "Whoa, okay, so
Now what?
what's my role now? What am I supposed to produce?" And it's like, "You're not. You're supposed to be present." And I was like, "Whoa, what?"
Mm,
And so I think it's helping me to be a more present and more attuned to what's happening within me and between us and trying to redirect back to that. And sometimes it is disappointing. I mean, I am going through menopause. I don't really have the hormones to support a lot of great things right now. My thyroid went kaput. Sometimes just my body is disappointing in that sense that maybe it doesn't have capacities that it used to have. And yet, if I can stay present, that disappointment sort of fades, like because there's an expectation to me. There's
Yeah,
just what is between us in this space. Like there is just this space for us to go to together. And it's not about, and when you go there, make sure that you meet this expectation.
yeah, absolutely. I think to summarize it, really, disappointment's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not feeling disappointment in your marriage, then you're not engaged in an intimate relationship. And so it's going to happen. If you will allow it to have you stop, pause, be curious, and understand what those things are telling you, and go back to what you know can bring you closer and more intimate, then it will be a blessing. If you don't do that, then it will be so frustrating and it will really pull you further apart.
I think disappointment also brings in the opportunity for grace. Because if you're going to be intimate, you're making room for someone else, and their experience is always going to be different than yours different than theirs. And so there's an element of making room for them that means you're allowing for things to be different, to be maybe not quite as you expected. Because if it stays in your own realm and your own mind, it's all about you. But when you're opening up to intimacy, you're opening up to a whole nother person. And so there's got to be some grace in there.
I think Jennifer puts it well. She says, true differentiation or true sign of how well your marriage is working is how well you can handle disappointment. Well, again, it's been a challenge. We've overcome it. We've had a lot of disappointments trying to get here.
Yes, we have.
But what a pleasure it is to sit and have this moment, even hundreds of miles away from you.
I know. I'm
It's,
missing you
it's
right now.
I miss you too, but you're gonna be here soon. Clifford's gonna be able to give you big kisses, and you'll enjoy that, and we'll have fun. So we appreciate everyone listening.
Yes,
It's
we do.
a great blessing to us, and we're so thankful. We would love in any way, if we can, to help you look and see maybe where some of your disappointments are and what they're causing you to do. Uh, Again, we're not perfect anyway, we mess it up, but we've been able to see it in so many clients and be able to help them through these areas. And we'd love to do that with you. Please join us on langfordlifecoaching.com. I'd love to have a free consult that buttons up in every single page.
We're always open to a conversation and your questions and any way that we can help support you. We really want to help create thriving marriages, intimate marriages, marriages where you can move through these roadblocks instead of just keep smacking your head against them, which is what it felt like for us. We just kept running into the same brick walls over and over and over and couldn't seem to get past them. And so we're hoping to break down some of those brick walls and help you dismantle them or walk through them.
I guess my final challenge to you is to, when those moments of disappointment come, to stop and be curious. If it's even just noting them and that's it, that's a huge step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Be you closer to being truly intimate. Well, until next time,
Keep undressing your intimacy.
bye bye.